Welcome to With You Podcast.
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David,
And I'm Tara.
and we're here talking with you about a topic that I love.
It's too bad we don't have something to eat while we talk about food.
I know it would be great to have although I don't think it would sound so great.
No, not good with the microphone.
No, you and our daughter do not like the food noise mouth sounds.
No.
I'm so tempted to do it right now.
I know you. I can see that. I can see that everything in you is trying not to smack into the microphone.
So it's probably good we don't have food.
Yes, we're not eating.
No.
But we've talked about food a lot, just sort of, it happenstance. It comes up. It tends to come up.
It does come up. And I know some of our friends ask us for things to do when they travel. And probably all the time it's restaurants and food tours.
I don't think we realized that until we gave a list to friends and they said, this is all food. And we're like, yeah.
What's your point?
Restaurants or walking food tours or
the only time it wasn't
shops.
Food is when it was like having them climb the highest point or find the lowest underground points. But in between, you have to nourish.
Right. So to us, it's just a given that food is a big part of life, that it's important, that a lot of life centers around food.
Yeah, and if you think about our content, we're always wanting to talk about relationship and life transition, and food is a relationship. The relationship with food, the relationships that happen around food, how it's connected to culture, all of that is so central to relationship.
Right. And we've kind of thought about that, but we thought it'd be interesting to talk about not just about how food is central in relationships and cultures, but also we have a relationship with food as well. Yeah.
I know. At first I just listed out like 27 pages of restaurants and memories
I know.
of
when we talk
different
about
type of food and relationship to the restaurants and good experiences, bad experiences. I think that would be an interesting stories.
You just basically gave me a list of like every meal you ever ate.
I thought that's what you wanted. That's my relationship. Here's my family history of food. And it was a nice genogram of here's what we ate here and why and what happened. And, that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what I mean. Those stories are interesting. We have a lot of stories that around food and funny
food adjacent,
funny eating food adjacent. Yeah. And I'm sure that will come up, but we're gonna talk about kind of the relational power of food, the relational glue that food can be, how it can enhance connection, how we have a cultural relationship with food. So we're going to kind of go through all of those things.
It's the glue that kind of shapes relationships.
Although when I say glue in relationship with food, I don't really like that.
Well, you just think of mashed potatoes, right? And just something like that.
If a food is described as gluey, it's not a good thing.
and I might sneak in some stories.
Oh, sure.
Around this.
I welcome the stories.
And research. So I did some
oh no.
kind of research.
Food research.
Yeah. And we'll cover that in a surprising way as we go.
One might say we've all been researching food our whole lives.
Yeah. Well, and having a granddaughter and thinking about food and development and the exposure to food, when is it the same food can be helpful, not helpful at different developmental times.
Yeah.
And your relationship that way too. So all right, let's get started. I'm actually getting hungry. We should have done this after lunch.
All right. So, I mean, I guess I was thinking about this, I was thinking about what food do I remember us first sharing together? Like what's the first meal you can remember us having together?
I remember our first date that was food interrupted.
Oh, what was that?
Well, not our first date, when I proposed to you.
Oh, yeah. But way earlier than that. I was thinking the same thing, though. I was thinking
fondue.
That's the only one I could remember.
Yeah.
Fondue.
Yeah.
So our first
we
outing.
Put the fun in fondue.
We did. Yeah. You took me to a fondue restaurant in Chicago.
Yeah.
And it kind of became like our signature meal that we served to to guests in our home too.
Yeah.
You had a fondue pot from
Yeah.
the 1970s.
1970s. It was, that kind of mustard. It was a nasty color
I don't
fondue set. And then we
remember
got a red
that.
one.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've had a few over the years, and we graduated to an electric one after the Sterno Fire
Yeah.
one.
We didn't have any accidents with the fire, but it always felt
Close
risky.
to it, though. I
Yeah.
remember once trying to blow it out, which was a mistake. You're supposed to
Yes.
cover it. Don't blow out your Sterno fuel.
No, it just
Yeah.
spreads it
But
around.
I think that meal sort of, just the process of having a fondue meal is
Yeah.
kind of, I don't know, it's a good illustration of what we like about food. It takes a long time. It's definitely relational. I can't imagine anybody sits and eats fondue by themselves.
Yeah, that's not I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have multiple forks, you have food that you dip in one bite at a time. So it kind of sneaks up on you too. Like you think you're just having a little bite of bread and cheese and then, some apple and then, and it progresses and before you know it, you're pretty full
Yep.
and you've spent quite a few hours talking and laughing over things dropped into the fondue.
And
And
what are the traditions about if you drop things off of your fork in the fondue?
the tradition is if you drop it, you have to kiss somebody, right?
Yeah. Preferably your
Was
partner.
that why it was our first date?
I think it was. I think I needed all the excuses I could get. I think our very first meal was not meal, but we went for ice cream at the Stoop. I got you to skip chapel, and I think that was our first time.
Okay.
Or maybe it was in O'Hare Airport when we were leaving.
I don't think we ate anything there.
No,
We couldn't
but
afford food at
yeah,
the
that's right.
airport.
That's right. Well, I think about connectors, food as connection as well in terms of the research shows having family meals together reduces the likelihood of delinquency for teenagers. It increases academic performance. It's pretty amazing, and it's not the meal in and of itself.
Right. I was going to say, what's magic about the food?
It's the relationships around the food. And so like if you think about getting together at a family meal, you're aware of what's going on, either where people are coming from or where they're going to, the timing. So there's a investment in each other's relationship that otherwise doesn't happen. There's the connection of time together, of sharing your inner world or just grunts. I mean, sometimes teenagers are just grunting, but there's that time together that's a protective factor against risks that are out there for our teenagers. And nowadays it's having to have a tech-free meal.
Right, right. I'd say that even the people who say they have family meals now, it looks different than it used to.
Yeah.
Because I know your family and my family, when we were growing up, that was a staple of family life together. We had dinner together every night, unless it was absolutely impossible. But even when there were 5 kids with different schedules, and my dad was coming home at different times from work all the time, we'd still have dinner together, and it was. Yeah, I mean, obviously we had no phones,
Yeah, no.
but there was conversation happening. We both say this is why we're fast eaters too, because there was competition to make sure you got the last bite of lasagna or
It
whatever.
also might be why we're competitive.
Maybe.
So competitive and fast eaters just
Yeah.
for survival. And it was the same. So your dad was a physician, mine was a mortician, and it was not a regimented, like a scheduled, we're going to eat at 5:45, but it was, we're all going to eat together. And it could be earlier, it could be late,
Yeah.
but it
So it took effort.
quite the effort to try to organize everybody's schedules.
Yeah. And for my mom, I remember my mom's frustration too of trying, maybe having planned it at a certain time and then somebody's home late and having to keep food warm or, the timing thing was difficult, but we really made it work.
And the thing, just thinking about this, we're not talking about the actual food of the meal. It was the time together. It was the logistics. And so thinking about that, I know how hard it is for families to do that. I mean, when our kids were in sports and concerts and it was mayhem, but yet, and so we regulated to, there were a few days that were non-negotiable in terms of having meals together because we couldn't do it all the time.
Well, even the days where they had sports practice, we just adapted a little differently. I would have kind of a mini meal when they came home and did homework before we went to sports practice. So they'd have something small, we'd be together, and then after we all got home from the practices, there'd be a second meal sometimes, like the other half of the meal.
Right.
But I think it is a challenge, the non-tech thing, or even just having people eat the same things. I think that's different than it used to be too. It
Yeah.
was just not even a question of somebody getting a different meal than what everybody else was eating in our time. It was just you eat this casserole or
Yeah.
you don't eat anything at all. Now I think people try to adapt to lots of different dietary requirements, and that's another challenge.
Yeah. And thinking about for us that time together of removing distractions. So we didn't have phones, but TV had to be turned off and
Mhm.
people had to sit, even if you were a fast eater and done, sit present with the family until the slowest eater was done. And sometimes that involved a lot of shade.
Yeah, which in
And
our kids' lives, because our boys tended to be finished more quickly, and our
yeah.
daughter at the end was the healthier eater, which, we said
Hmm.
that's actually probably a good thing that it took her so long, but the boys weren't allowed to leave the table till we were all done.
Yeah.
So, which is, I think, what sometimes led to them trying to help her finish faster by
Eating
pilfering
off
some
her.
of her food. And, the two previous episodes that we just did on fun conversation
Yeah.
topics were part of what we did to try to keep that time
At the
fun
end. Yeah.
and keep conversation flowing at the table, because there's nothing our kids hated more than what did you do in school today?
Yeah.
They would just be like, same thing we always do.
Well,
So
what
we,
was new? What was different? And it became an interrogation.
right. It felt like, yeah,
Like working really hard to get something here, and
like
they're
the
like,
bare light bulb
yeah,
comes down from the ceiling and they
yes,
have to sit there alone on the
you
bench. And
you must talk before you leave this table.
yeah, so we tried to get more creative with questions that would make everybody laugh, and we'd tell stories too, and it helped it not be something they didn't look forward to.
Right.
There
And
was a lot of negatives I just said.
well, and we still do that around the table,
Mhm.
even with the 12 of us of sitting, and it usually ends up being a long time because it's where the best conversations happen.
Mhm.
It's a captive
Well, and if you
audience.
think about just the what's happening as far as spatial, where everybody is in the
Yeah.
room when we're around a table, we're all facing each other.
Yeah.
How many other times does that happen? We're all facing each other without any other distractions. And we've also got food to eat, which helps with not always keeping eye contact.
Yeah.
If the kids don't want to, gives them something else to do while also staying engaged.
I think about family dynamics in the meal table of our family. We kind of have seats, like there's places people sit,
Yeah,
and it's kind of structured around the
I know.
family
I
structure.
don't think we did it on purpose, but that's an interesting thing about tables is and historically,
Yeah.
there's like an order to where people sit depending on their
Their rank and
rank.
privilege in the family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we didn't do that intentionally, but we do have places.
No, yeah, and it's fascinating how those places kind of represent on some level how our family functions.
Mhm.
And when people take other places, it gets, especially when guests come and they sit in someone's place, I can always see the like little, no one says anything, but
Yeah.
there's a little discomfort of like,
Well, I think our
oh,
kids kinda know how it's gonna go because we have a big rectangle table with a trestle, so there's not legs on all 4 corners, and I
yeah,
I picked that intentionally so we could fit more legs around the table, but one side has a long bench, which is not the most comfortable for those of us who are older and need back support.
that's right.
So the younger ones in the family know if we have more people around the table, they all get the bench.
Yeah. The younger you are, the more likely you're getting the bench.
Yeah, right.
And the older you are, you get back support.
Right. And I know, like when I grew up, my parents sat at either end of the table, dad at one end, mom at the other end, the kids in the middle. And we don't do that.
No.
Like, I don't think we set an intention as, we don't want to do that. It just, I sit next to you.
Yeah,
You
we
sit at
sit
the head
together.
and I sit next to you. And when you are out of town, I usually take your place.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Because it's kind of weird if we don't have somebody on the end
Yeah.
and none of the kids chooses it. So I
Oh,
sit there.
how fun. And next time take a picture so I can see that.
All right.
Well, and I think family dynamics play out on meals too, but it doesn't have to be just at home because I think about our both of our families. We had a lot of potlucks both with extended families at the
Yeah.
beach, but also church. Like the same power of a meal in a individual family can be an extended family or a church family.
Mhm.
And I mean, when I was growing up, I was annoyed by them, but I really like church potlucks.
We'll
Um,
have to paint a picture of the especially the Midwest American potluck. So
yes.
everybody comes to
Well, why
church
is it called
and they
potluck?
bring well, it's the luck of the pot. Like, you choose wisely,
Yeah.
and people would bring what they'd call a covered dish,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So it would be like you'd bring your dish from home, something you cooked at home, and it was covered to
Yeah.
keep it warm while we sat in church, and then you'd everybody would come down to the church basement usually,
Yeah.
and there'd be tables laid out with everybody's dish, whatever they brought. Some churches organize it by, bring a main dish, bring a dessert. Some
Yeah.
just
Ours was,
luck of the pot.
yeah, we would say it's spirit led
Yeah.
and luck of the pot.
Yeah.
And it was mostly like in my growing up in
Yeah.
Western Michigan, it was mostly cheesy casseroles
Yeah. And Jello with things in it.
and Jello with vegetables and fruit in it. If you've ever seen a
Yeah.
Jello mold, and
Yeah.
picture a clear kind of usually green Jello that would have broccoli and
Seriously, broccoli?
broccoli.
Like, no
And
joke.
no joke. And then pear or peach
And they call it a salad,
they call it a
right?
salad.
That's a
That
salad.
was as close to it was green, and that was as close to any leafy vegetable I had most of the time growing up.
But that was also uniquely that time period in America, I
Yeah, the
think.
70s,
Yeah.
80s.
The Jello molds and the casseroles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing we're as healthy as we are.
I know.
And it was like in a cinder block basement.
Yeah.
And
With
the chairs
metal
were
folding
metal
chairs.
folding chairs.
Mhm.
But it would be, you'd get to hear stories from the old timers and the kids would be running around. It was organized chaos,
Mhm.
but it was a sense of family. It was a sense of togetherness. You recognize when people were missing. You'd reach out to them. Hey, are you okay? We'll bring you some leftover casserole. They're like, no, I'm sick. And that's the last thing I need is cheesy casserole.
Yeah, and you probably knew whose dish, people had the dishes they were known
Oh
for.
yeah, and you'd want to get first if Aunt Lois was there with her dish, and if you're
Right.
late, you're going to get the one that is everybody hasn't touched.
Mhm.
So I wonder if anybody felt that way, like, oh, no one's eating my casserole.
Yeah.
Kind of the shame
Oh, yeah.
of it.
Oh, still in church potlucks, there's shame if you walk away with a full dish. You wanna bring something that goes fast. Yeah, and I know in that your church did a lot of those potlucks, and various churches I've been a part of have done that too, and also traditions of just going somewhere together after church,
Yeah,
where your family and your friends also did that, met at the Wendy's or
yeah.
or,
Well, that was back when that restaurant had a salad bar, and we would just destroy
decimate it.
all you could eat, and the 50 Van Dykes would show up and have at it.
Yeah.
I think we're one of the reasons they stopped doing all you could eat salad bar at Wendy's.
That's great.
Well, it's true. Uh, and then I think thinking about connection too. So there's these places that we have the meal, but there's also the prep, the serving,
Mm.
the cleanup. There's a
Yeah.
relational dance
Yeah.
that goes to the whole production and deconstruction of mealtime.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think about that in terms of in a smooth moving kind of meal prepping and eating and tearing down. There's everybody has their roles and it works pretty smoothly, but that's not always the case. There can be roles that no one wants to do, and then there's tension in the family.
Mhm.
Luckily, we have a
We've
goodness
got
of fit
we've
in
got a
terms of
good balance
how
now.
that
It
goes.
took us some years to get there, but we've got a good balance now. But you're right, I hadn't put a lot of thought into the fact that it's not just the time around the table,
No,
especially in some other cultures that we know. All the women gather together and assemble the meal together, prepare the vegetables, or cut the meat, do those things together, make dumplings. And I love that. That's part of teaching to the next generation to how to make these things with maybe no written recipe. Just they know how to do it because they've seen you roll those noodles or whatever.
yeah, it's really the love of that is so beautiful. We talk about that like you're baking. It tastes great because you put love into it. There's a joy about doing it
Mhm.
that actually makes the food taste different. I
Mhm.
know that's not chemistry, that's myth, but it's true that
Well,
there's
and there
something about food prepared that's enjoyable.
yeah, and there's joy in making the things that you know people are the people's favorites and
Yeah,
being able to present it to them.
yeah.
I love feeding a group of hungry young people who really appreciate eating and that something's homemade.
Right. We have my undergrad class over, and it's a wonderful time
Mhm.
of giving them kind of different nutrition than they have at the cafeteria, but also just being together in a family setting shifts the way that the conversation goes, the connection goes. It's a pretty meaningful time.
Yeah, and you mentioned the people who maybe don't show up for the church potlucks, and that's another part of connection with food is bringing people food, you know?
Mm,
Often it's the way we show love and care for somebody when they're sick or if they've just had a baby or they've got something else going on in their family that just basic needs are hard to take care of. It's a great way to show love. I remember the meals that were brought to us when we had babies.
yeah.
Um, and I remember the people who brought them. It's kind of a connection to them and their kitchen and the way they cared for us.
And how they thought through. So some would bring it on their fine china, and
Yeah.
then we'd have to clean it and make sure we don't break it and get it back, which fostered connection, which
Yeah.
was really cool. And then there's others that brought it in throwaway, disposable kind of
Mhm.
containers, which was thoughtful on a different way.
Mhm.
That was like, oh, it's not any of the work; it's just can be consuming and experience the making of it, the serving of it, and the disposal of
Right.
the
Right.
dishes.
So you don't have to clean up afterwards.
The last thing on connection, and I think we should probably move on, is one of the things that we do in our interview process at the university is
Mhm.
we take the faculty member out for a meal,
Mhm.
and it's a celebratory thing of just kind of like, oh, all the interrogation is over, and yet it is a really important data point in terms
Mhm.
of how are you when you're off and
Mhm.
just relaxed and being real with each other, because that's important as well.
Yeah.
And so going out, I think if you're in business, I don't know if they do that anymore. Everything's so electronic, but I think there's something that's lost in understanding the connection of this person to the organization by the meal around interview process. So if you're an HR person or hiring, I would encourage you to use mealtime as a good place for assessment of connection and goodness of fit with the organization.
Yeah. And I think that's been done in businesses, but it's probably you probably see the more real side of somebody and how they treat the staff and how they, just a lot of things. I
Yeah.
think it used to be done as a sort of an etiquette test too.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, can you
Manners.
conduct yourself well at a business meal
Yeah.
while you're doing deals? But yeah, it's a great thing to just see how somebody interrelates.
Yeah. Their relational skill.
Hmm.
I think that relationship happens. We see that across culture too. I think that's the second thing that we wanted to talk about of food and culture.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we've mentioned this in lots of different contexts on the podcast because it's one of the reasons we love to travel is seeing people prepare food and eat food in different places and learning along with them about their culture and their history through their food.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it says a lot about a region, the kind of food they eat, the spices that they like or don't like, the way they gather or don't gather.
Yeah, and just trying not to be offensive. So I find that you have that etiquette piece,
Mhm.
having a meal together, you can really learn about a culture, and you can learn all the places where you can be offensive. I've made lots of those mistakes at the dinner table. I mean, I was in one culture where the men ate first, and
Mhm.
then the women and children would eat the leftovers, and I didn't know that. And so the hospitality of the culture was have more, eat to your fill as
Mhm.
the male guest. And it was just like, oh, finally the wife came and walked by and said, that food is for our kids. And I was like, no. And because
Yeah.
you're following the lead on one level, but you don't necessarily know how the whole dynamic goes.
Mhm.
And same thing in terms of saying yes or no on refills of coffee or other things. Of what are the things that you do to communicate, and it's not always your way of communicating. I got in so much trouble. I had more caffeine. I thought my heart was going to explode.
Because they kept filling up your cup.
Yeah, there was a way you had to shake it, and I just kept giving the cup back, and they kept
And
giving
this
me
is
a
in the
cup of
Middle East,
coffee.
so it's
Yeah,
very strong
yeah, it
coffee.
was gahwa, and
Yeah.
I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
Yeah.
Finally,
Yeah.
someone said, "Just go like this," and
So
shaking it.
you're shaking the cup to show
Yeah, that you're
that
done.
you're done. Yeah, my dad used to prep us for that when we would be invited into a home in Kenya for a meal, our whole family, which was, I mean, wow, 7 of us.
Yeah,
Nobody usually wants to have a family of 7 over.
no,
But my dad would kind of give us a pep talk before we went in and said, "They will be so generous to keep offering you more food, but if you finish your plate, they're gonna put more on your plate, and they probably don't have more for the next day then.
yeah,
And they will fill up your cup too, same thing with your coffee if you finish it." So just because we were taught to clean our plate,
clean your plate.
finish up. We were all fast at that.
Yeah,
So he advised us not to do that, to leave some on the plate, to not drink our cup completely because they would get Coca-Cola
yeah.
and for the guests. So leave it in your cup so that they're not constantly refilling and then, spending more. And
Yeah, it's a challenge, and you only I mean, for me, it was only learning through all the mistakes,
yeah.
and having really generous friends that were willing to explain things,
Yeah, and
and
different
like your
just
dad.
things we're not used to, like, we love Ethiopian food, and, I think I was introduced to it the first time was it in Chicago? Or maybe I'd had it before, but there's no utensils.
No,
It's all eaten with your hands, and so, if you're looking around and asking for a utensil, you're already out of place because you gather it with this injera with the bread, and you pick up the food with the bread and
yeah.
eat it with your hand, and it's communal. You're all sharing off the big same
Right, so you
plate
have to
too.
picture this. There's a big round plate that has injera, which is spongy, kind of citrusy,
Flat
fermented
bread.
bread,
Yeah.
but it's spongy. It's
Yeah.
flat but
Yeah.
spongy, and they have that down on the plate, and then they have the different
The piles of the different kinds of
food.
foods
Yeah,
that and
goat, lamb, vegetarian,
chicken, chickpeas,
most of it hotter than
lentils.
blazes.
Yeah.
And then there's the injera for you as your utensil.
Mhm.
And it's a really fun activity, but if you don't like your food touching itself on your plate, you're going to have a hard time with this
Yeah,
because we're all reaching into the
and
same
touching
plate and
things
touching
and
thing, and it
yeah.
gets mixed together.
Oh,
And
so good. It's making me hungry too.
but it's communal. And then the tea that they have, which is
Mhm.
more clove based,
Mhm.
cardamom and clove based tea that numb your tongue to help with the heat. It's this intricate dance that's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
Yeah. Another way of eating that was different for me was when I lived in Japan for the summer, and you often are not on a chair. So this one was out without utensils.
Okay.
This is
No
without a
chair.
chair. So you're kneeling on a tatami mat and at a low table, which was customary in a lot of the places I went to, but really hard on American legs that don't kneel down like that. Like we
Yeah.
just aren't accustomed to that. So your legs are falling asleep, you're shifting, you're trying to get comfortable, and you're looking really fidgety. And that takes some practice.
Well, and I like the story. So we've been watching a new show in our free time. That's about this guy that goes and he's a chef, but he's telling people's family stories cross culturally in that, and so kind of Americans or people from the West are going to their countries of their family's origin and learning about their family from distant relatives. And it's things like that, like, oh, we don't sit down, or this is how we make this dish, and this is who did it and why this is important. So the story around your family dynamic gets played out in the food.
Mhm.
Do you have family stories or a family meal that's kind of connected that way from either in the States or in
Hmm.
Kenya?
Well, I mean, my my family origin is pretty like eh, it's multi-ethnic, and
Yeah, yeah.
and we spent short amounts of time in lots of places. But if I think of the first ones that come to my mind are when we lived in Kenya. We would make African food sometimes, and chapatis, which come from Indian food, but
Mhm.
there's a blend there because there's a lot of Indians in Kenya. So, we would learn to make chapatis. We'd learn to make ugali, which is made of maize um, flour. And so those are stories that are connected to our family history for a few generations, but not really to our ethnic
Identity.
identity or heritage. It's
Yeah.
just kind of where generations of our family lived. In Australia, there's not really a really national dish, except I do make the pavlova.
Yeah, pavlova.
The dessert that there's a fight between New Zealand and Australia about who started the pavlova,
Oh, dear.
named after the ballerina because
The
she's so light when
Russian
she came and
ballerina, yeah.
performed there. And so the pavlova is a meringue that's really light and airy, and it traditionally in Australia you pile it with whipped cream and then passion fruit, but we don't easily get passion fruit, so I've got adaptations that I
Yes.
make. But that's a thing that's connected to our family.
Yeah, that connects you to the Australian/New
Yeah, and I
Zealand.
remember my Aunt Ellie making it and hearing the mixer go really fast to whip up the eggs, and my grandmother doing it probably with a hand mixer, not with a big KitchenAid, and whipping
Yeah.
up the eggs. And so, yeah, I do have some memories with a few dishes.
Well, and I remember it's not identity connected to culture and food, but like the specialness of uh, eating McDonald's as a missionary family coming on furlough. And
Yeah, I mean, that's a one-time story, but when we came back from Africa and I was 14, spent the night in one hotel room before we were moving into our home or whatever. And my dad went out and got McDonald's, and it was like 2 hamburgers for all of us. So we would literally
for
we all sat
seven
on
people.
the edge of the bed and passed it around and took a bite.
Yeah.
And it was mostly because it was the symbol of America that we hadn't had for 4 years. And it was kind of like spoke that we were back, and that
Yeah.
and my dad really was against us having fast food. He had said, like, "We don't wanna get, unhealthy living in America. We're not gonna have soda and fast food in the house," and
Yep.
that eventually that kind of eroded. But it's funny that
Acculturation.
Right, right,
Yeah.
because it's so convenient. But that he started us out
Yeah.
with French fries and a Big Mac is kind of funny.
That is, but it goes to that you're connecting to the American culture, and the
Mhm.
meal was a connection, whether it was good or bad, was a connection.
Well, and I think I told this story before, but when we would go to Mombasa in Kenya, you could sometimes board the ships of the U.S. military who were docked in the port there. And I remember seeing the American flag and hearing the pop and hiss of a Coke can opening
Yeah.
was it just spoke America. Obviously the flag, but
Hmm.
that sound
Yeah.
was because we had bottles of Fanta and things like that in Kenya, but that Coke can and that fast food that just
That
exemplifies our
that did
country
it.
for
That
good or
did
for
it.
bad. Yeah. Any other family stories around food for you? Anything that sort of
Yeah, there's
symbolizes.
two cultural connections. And at first, the first one I thought was Dutch, and it's really not. It's really my non-Dutch grandmother, and it was that she would make for our birthdays oyster stew,
Mhm.
which is whole milk. I'm lactose intolerant. Uh, Oysters fried up in
Butter.
butter and salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And that smell and taste makes me think of my grandma.
Yeah.
And it was for all of us Van Dyke boys got that for our birthday.
Mhm.
And I thought it was Dutch, and it was really coming from Connecticut and my
Yeah.
grandmother's family
Mhm.
history in Connecticut, which is really neat because there's not a lot that was talked about. And we've been talking about this. I think food transmits the women's side of history, where it oftentimes gets lost, especially
Mhm.
traditions in the U.S. with naming
Mhm.
the male name taken on, and
Yeah.
that the women's history gets lost. I think it's through the food. I mean, at least my family has been the cultural connection to my grandmothers have been through the food. And my grandma Vandertil, it was apple pie, with
Cheddar cheese.
cheddar cheese on top, and very Dutch and
Yeah.
very tasty.
Yeah.
And those two things make me connected to my grandmothers and the culture of where that came from. And
Yeah.
then
And
coffee
you
is
didn't
my
mention
grandpa.
banquette. I've tried to help with that tradition because
Yes,
your mother taught
yes,
me to make that, and it's a flaky pastry filled with almond filling that we usually make at the holidays. And
yes.
your mom taught me how to make that in her kitchen, and even though that's not my
Culture.
heritage culture, I've have passed that on to our kids and kids-in-law, and have taught them to make it to hopefully kind of pass that on as a family heritage tradition.
Yeah, and it's a fun family event of making the banquet, eating it, giving it to friends. I like
Hmm.
the eating it part. And
We do
it's,
travel around the neighborhood sometimes and deliver it to friends.
yeah, and
Yeah.
most everybody likes it. I mean, sometimes you think almond paste, oh, it is so
Oh,
good.
so good.
And so that connects us across the generations. And I think when you think about our international students coming to the U.S.,
Mm.
the food helps connect back home. And so you're really good at having people over and cooking a little bit of the national meal or having them participate in that to kind of connect with home, a sense of home when you're feeling displaced.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing that what is comfort food to one person can be totally unfamiliar to somebody else. We did have a guest once who is married to a Korean.
Hmm.
He was on the podcast way at the beginning,
Yeah, yeah.
and he eats. I put out breakfast, and I think he was kind of allergic to most everything, and ended up needing. And we found all the things he liked, but it was kimchi and rice and seaweed, kind of stuff that we would not think of for breakfast.
Right,
But
right.
that made him feel at home, and that was comforting to him. And comfort food can look really different across people and families and cultures.
Yeah, and being able to provide that, and um, it's hospitality, and I think that's a big part. Whether it's memory, or I like to call smemory, because the smell of certain foods, like the smell of apple pie, it's a smemory. But I think it's not just the food, but there's a sense of hospitality that can happen. So, like you were saying, when we had young kids, people from our church community in our neighborhood would bring meals
Mhm.
as a way of caretaking,
Mhm.
and communicating, we care, we're here for you. And it might seem like a little thing, but it means a lot. And having generous hospitality, you're really good at setting the table, and occasionally using our china.
Mhm.
And I don't think people do that much anymore. And yet, preparing the table, we have some friends that do that, and it can feel awkward, but it's also really beautiful in terms of the thought that goes into
Mhm.
it. To like, I've thought about you, I've tried to make something beautiful, and want to invite you to the table.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I got that from my mother and my grandmother. They always set a beautiful table, and it feels special. It doesn't have to be a fancy meal. It's just having a nice flower arrangement on the table and candles if you want to, and a placemat and pretty napkin, and it feels nice. And I think beauty kind of sets the mood.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
would do that to make our kids feel special on birthdays, have a different plate than everybody else's, and eventually got consumerism got a made plate that was you are special. But it
That
was,
was actually given to me by my cousin, I
huh.
think. Yeah.
And it kind of highlights in
Mhm.
that we set a table, and then there's a uniqueness of like, this is a time to call you out
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
highlight you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've said a lot about food having a meaning other than just, as fuel for
Yeah.
our bodies, because essentially that's what it's for, right? That's what food is
Yeah.
meant to nourish us and help us grow and
Food
keep
is
us
fuel.
right. And it's medicine and it's comfort, but there's so much more. I think God somehow also created it to be one of the great pleasures in life.
Hmm.
And so we can sometimes misuse it too. I think we all have different relationships with food.
Yeah.
Some people really just see it. I'm always fascinated by the people who just see it as
Energy.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what are the nutrients and macros and whatever that I need to fuel my body, and keep it moving efficiently, and I admire that. I just don't. It's
Hmm.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because there's so much more to it. So I think, we can have problems with food. We can go too much towards just enjoying it for pleasure, or we can have disorders where we're afraid of it. We're afraid that it might affect our body in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting to talk about how we relate to food, or
Yeah.
how it's been a challenge.
Well, and even like what food is. So the relationship with food in the US, food has been made to kind of induce you to eat more because it's preserved in sugar and
Yeah.
fructose and
And we
high
have
fructose
excess.
and excess. And so traveling, I see the difference in food and the relationship that the actual food has with me as well as me with the food. So
Hmm.
in my profession, I see a lot of people eating their feelings. It's not about the food, but it's about the mechanism of eating being a soothing mechanism
Hmm.
for their internal life, and that food becomes the only way to comfort to comfort your anxiety, your
Yeah.
trauma. It's an oral stimulation that relaxes you, which I'm glad it's a coping skill, but it has consequences if that's the only mechanism, because then there's weight gain and other health issues that happen. And it's not the best way to deal with emotions.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah, we all do it, and we laugh about it. Like, I had a hard day. I need some chocolate, or,
yeah,
whatever it is that's our kind of pleasure or comfort or whatever. But I think it can also be tied up in so many things to do with control and shame. And, like in our household too, like I mentioned, my dad was worried about us becoming unhealthy when we lived in the US. So snacks were control. You could not just help yourself to food ever. He
yeah.
wanted us to have 3 meals a day, no snacks in between.
You couldn't open the
And
fridge
so
door
I
without permission.
felt a
Yeah,
snack was a really naughty, naughty thing,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
a bad thing that I see other people where food becomes sort of controlled, or they've exerted control over what they put in their body, that it's more of like a guilt shame kind of relationship with food, and that can be dangerous.
yeah. And then when you come from two different families, so my family was, even just recently, we went and visited my mom. And as soon as we arrived, she left like beautiful snacks. And because food is love. So thinking about food
Yeah.
soothing your emotions, but food is also an expression of love. And you do that too. Like
Yeah.
when we
Oh,
show
yeah.
love, we provide food.
Yeah.
So you come from a more like, let's be disciplined about this.
Yeah.
And I come from like, hey, let's sling it around because it's love. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
food slinging as love. And so then when we form a household, there's tension of
Mhm.
like, what's our shared relationship with
Mhm.
food? Because our family of origins have been very different.
Yeah.
And having to navigate that together.
Yeah.
Who knew couples could fight over
Over
food?
snacks.
Yeah, and whether to have them or not, and how to dispense them, and
Exactly.
all of
Yeah.
that. And it's not about the food, but it's about our relationship with the food and our relationship with each other and how we navigate that. And I think there might be better ways and worse ways, but I don't think there's a right way
Yeah.
about it. It's being thoughtful, being mindful
Mhm.
about the food and the process and relationship that you have with it. I like how you said that. Like, what's your relationship with food? I can describe my relationship to you. Can I describe my relationship to food?
Yeah.
Is it shame? Is it control? Is it pleasure seeking? Is it soothing? Is it energy? There's just a
Well,
few.
and it can be all of those things, maybe at different times
And
and with different meals and different times of the day.
so maybe we have to look at what's the inner dialogue around that relationship. Like what are the words you tell yourself around food, or what's the conversation you have around food?
Yeah, and I feel like in some ways it's a luxury that we even have this issue with food, because in some countries that we know of, they people get one meal a day. And we have to restrict ourselves, or decide how often we're going to eat, or
Yeah.
now it's really in vogue to do intermittent fasting. So, going a certain number of hours without food and having a window in which you eat. So, because we've got so many choices and food is readily available, I think we have more issues with how we control it in our own lives.
Yeah. And what is in our food. I mean, I feel
Yeah.
so much better. I have a better relationship with food in Europe than I do in the
Mm-hmm.
US. And I can have the same mechanism of eating and the same caloric intake, and yet my body responds differently
Yeah.
to the different food.
Yeah. And that
So
is so
that's a whole episode in and of
that could be a
itself.
whole episode, because what is in our food has a huge effect on our bodies, on our addictions, on our behavior, all sorts of
Yeah,
things.
even thinking about, like you talked about food as medicine, of we've kind of lost the connection of what, not only does this food taste good, because it's usually about our pleasure of the food, but
Hmm.
what does it do? Is it anti-inflammatory? Is it good for gut health? Like how do we have a sense of dosage based on what the food provides for us versus just taste?
Hmm.
And that's a whole nother way of thinking of,
Yeah.
like, because I realize the different types of food have different inflammatory, and that's good for me.
Hmm.
And so, am I thinking about not just taste, but anti-inflammatory food is good for me and for our relationship, because I don't snore when I eat that.
Right. We've noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't snore in Europe. And
We're not giving medical advice. That's just unique to
yes,
me.
let's make
But
a disclaimer.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my age and stage of life, I'm exploring with finding phytoestrogens and,
Is that all the
natural.
nuts and seeds that I'm finding
Uh-huh.
around the kitchen? Okay, okay, good.
Yeah, pumpkin seeds and all kinds of things.
Sunflower seeds take me back to the baseball days.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's good. Again, not making any medical recommendation, but this is kind of how we're thinking about food, of like, how can it benefit us, not just taste wise or soothe emotion, but benefit our bodies and be a good relationship that way.
Right, right, because it does have short-term and long-term effects on our health.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be a whole nother episode, but we kind of want to move into another aspect of food, is that it can be a spiritual practice. The way we use food, it's involved in a lot of rituals and
Mm,
traditions, around our faith. And so it's got symbolic meaning,
yeah.
and connective and healing properties.
Yeah. Well, a significant part of our faith practice is communion,
Mm,
and it's talked about in Scripture as a meal,
hmm.
and yet we've distilled it down to a small piece of bread and a little sippy cup. But the thing that I like about that, and you talk about symbolism, is it's not just the actual doing the bread, eating the bread and drinking the wine, but it's, what is that and how is that symbolic of the bounty and beauty of Jesus? And
Yeah.
I know I especially heard you say that more around COVID times.
Yes, because when we were taking communion during COVID, churches rightfully were dealing with how to have
Safe
extra
practices.
safe practices
Yeah.
with hygiene and not sharing, touching things, amongst people. And so, a lot of the practices went to these tiny little plastic cups that were sealed, with a plastic seal over the top, and this little
Piece of
tiny
plastic.
mouthful of grape juice inside, and then a very plasticky tasting sort of wafer that was also
Yeah.
packaged. And I get why it happened,
Yeah.
but I was surprised at my reaction when I consumed that as a symbol of Christ's sacrifice for us. It felt soul
Less.
sucking, soulless to consume that, because it was not only tasteless, it was bad tasting, and it felt like not a good representation of something that should be, full of joy and of remembrance of a thing that is life changing for us. And
Yeah.
so, Yeah, I had strong feelings
You did have
about
strong
it, and it was a
feelings.
joy when we moved back into, especially at our church now, it's such a joy that our pastor makes homemade sourdough bread often that
Yes.
we get to eat as we walk up and receive it in our hands. That's another part of the practice that's really meaningful, is that people from the church stand up, and we've been part of that too, and that's a different kind of meaningful
Mhm.
to offer it to people. But
Right.
when you receive the piece of bread in your hand, somebody says, "This is the body of Christ broken for you." And it's meaningful, and it's tangible, and then it tastes good, and it just feels like it enhances the whole thought of the gift.
Right, because the senses are experiencing it in a vibrant way, like the grace is so
Hmm.
vibrant. And yeah, I found it interesting your reaction,
Hmm.
and but it does go to symbolism matters and experience matters, and
Hmm.
so how are we crafting and finding that good fit?
And our senses matter.
And our senses
And I think
matter.
a lot of churches kind of moved away from all the sensory things that were happening with incense and that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
I think, God gave us our senses to experience the world in and to learn and remember things with.
yeah.
And so I love it when our senses are enhanced and involved in our worship.
Yeah, and I think about our family table, and then thinking about what's called the Lord's table or communion, of that there's space at the table, there's a welcoming into this experience of
Hmm.
God's love, and remembering of what that is, and having a conversation about it, and our relationship with Him, all kind of fits the things we've been talking about, food and our relationship with food, then seeing it symbolized in a spiritual connection
Hmm.
is so powerful, that moves beyond just a head idea
Hmm.
to our head, our heart, our body, and the space between us,
Hmm.
with God and with each other. I love that about the, like you said, the offering and the kind of looking each other in the face and being present together. I wish it was an actual meal. Um,
Yeah, well, and it is. I think, we do the practice of communion in church as a symbolic ritual that we do to keep remembering why we're here and what we're grateful for
yeah,
that God did for us. But I think meals are always somehow sacred
yeah,
with people. And hospitality is a spiritual gift, and it is a practice that is about connection and is about everything that we believe in.
yeah,
You
giving and
know,
receiving, and
yeah, being able to receive it from others, being able to offer it even when we don't feel like we have enough. Because hospitality isn't about setting my table with candles and china. Hospitality is about letting somebody in who just knocked on the door and my house is messy,
yeah,
too. It's
and
the
say you're
welcoming.
welcome as we are.
Mhm.
Enjoy us as we are in
Yeah.
all our messiness.
Yeah.
And I think about too. I notice different people have different feelings about prayer before a meal, and
Mhm.
for me, that ritual is
Mhm.
about my position in relationship of thanks to God for all the blessings that He has given us, but also thanks for the people around the table being in our lives and the preparation of this. There's lots of spaces for gratitude,
Mhm.
starting with God, then to each other. That pause kind of then makes the meal sacred. It's
Mhm.
not a mystical sacredness, but it kind of orients us.
Orients us. I like that. Yeah, because I think we say a lot of thanks in our prayers around the table, but we also invite God's presence, which I think is also important because we've talked about time around the table as a time of conversation and laughter, but it can also be an uncomfortable conversation. A lot of people avoid family holiday meals because it
Yeah.
gets heated or old patterns come up, or somebody doesn't want to sit next to somebody, or some conversation is going to come up that's painful. And so the invitation for God to be among us is always our hope that, yeah, we might talk about hard things around the
Hmm.
table, and we do sometimes,
Yeah.
but may God's presence kind of guide us to not be intentionally hurting each other,
Right.
and make connection be the thing that we remember
And
about this time.
And those difficult dialogues being about trying to find shared space rather than trying to be right or
Mhm.
compete or put down. I think the times that we've had really good, difficult dialogues is when there's a curiosity of like, we're really trying to struggle with this together versus the times when, and I do this sometimes, I want to win. And
Yeah.
kind of make the point where you're not listening to the other. And again, the meal, the prayer, the grace, the thanksgiving kind of should orient us to, okay, how are we doing this together versus doing it against each other? Because at a meal, it's where you're eating together.
Yeah.
You're not eating against each other unless it's Nathan's kind of hot dog competition on the 4th of July here in the US.
Mhm.
And then they're seeing who
Oh,
can win eating the most and they eat
that's
against.
disgusting.
But most of the time it's eating together.
Yeah. So that's a lot to think about.
That is a lot.
Food
And
seems so simple, and yet
yeah, it's complex. It has multiple meanings. I think part of it is we have to slow down and experience it. That's, I think, our challenge is, can we slow down? Not just the hurry about let's get it done, move on to the next thing.
yeah,
But
be mindful about your own relationship to food, how it nourishes your body, but also your connections with people.
yeah,
And we hope maybe it'll inspire you to have a good meal with a friend or a family member this week, and think mindfully about your conversation and about the beauty of what you're eating and the gratefulness for what you have.
sounds good. Let's eat.